Why won't you?
So this is live show. I just need to transition through
Hello everyone. We're going to get started, so can everyone hear me on this thing? Can everyone hear me? We're going to get started, so as much as I'm loving the energy and the excitement and all the side conversations, our special guest is on a very tight schedule. So, my name is Phelan Atchison. I am a member of the church, and what we're going to do, we're going to get started with a prayer since this is a fireside. Don't feel pressured to participate in the prayer if that offends your sensibilities, but we're going to have Craig Musto come up and give us our opening prayer right about now.
Our Heavenly Father, as we gather before Thee as a group of people in support of Bernie, ask Thy blessings upon us. Help us to have our understanding with Him. Guide us so we might hear and say the things that need to be. Please bless those who speak and those who have organized, that they might have things come to fruition for them, that all will be orderly and well done in this meeting. Please bless the food we're going to take up and help us use that energy to do good things and positive things. We ask Thy Spirit to be with us, and we pray that all will go well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Craig, for that beautiful prayer. I'm going to introduce our special guest now. Our special guest today is going to be Dr. Jane Sanders. Woo! She should be arriving right about now. So.
I think this video is pretty great.
Okay, so Jane Sanders will be coming, and again, future First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jane Sanders. I'm just filling space, so
Play the video.
Do you want me to play the video, Rose?
Yeah, I'm actually ready.
Okay, we're ready.
Dr. Jane Sanders.
Thank you for coming. Here's your microphone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. What an incredible library. I was taking note of all the design. It's beautiful. We've just been in Salt Lake for a day, and Bernie will be joining us on Monday. There'll be a rally at the State Fair Park and at noon. I'm just really pleased to be here and talk with you about Bernie's and to hear it from you. I have a bit of a cold, or else it's not, I don't think it's really a cold. I think it's just I've been speaking a lot in Oklahoma and Tennessee and Minneapolis. So I'd rather just give a little bit of a talk and then hear from you, hear questions that you might have, and be able to answer them, and also to hear ideas from you and concerns. So I'm here to learn. I want to tell you a little bit about Bernie. We met back in 1981 when he was running for mayor, and I was a community organizer. And he had different ideas, and so our neighborhood organizations organized a debate. And the first time I heard him, I thought, I need to work for him. He is exactly what this country needs, what this city needs, and I didn't know then, I did start to work for him right away. I didn't know then that I would marry him 7 years later. But my first impression was a good one, and I can tell you, almost 40 years later, it remains so. So I think that one of the things that he's doing is going all over the country, and I'm doing as well, to go and learn the different community issues, as well as the ones that we know resonate around the country. We know that healthcare is a major concern, and the need for universal healthcare is something that Bernie feels very strongly about, and that's why he proposed Medicare for All, a single-payer system that will provide healthcare as a human right, just like every other industrialized nation in the world offers. And then we also is concerned, as I know people in Utah are, on education, for education and childcare. Our educational systems need to be better funded. We need to be able to provide an access to good quality childcare, as the first 4 years, as all of us know, are some of the most formative and important years of a person's life. So we need to support families in terms of helping them with childcare. Our K through 12 is woefully underfunded, and by property taxes, which is a very regressive form of taxation. And so the federal government needs to reprioritize and re-up its contributions in terms of resources to the communities, because our K through 12 education needs federal support as well as state and city. And then, of course, you've heard that he is supportive of having public colleges and universities be tuition-free, so that when somebody's in 6th grade, they don't start lowering their expectations of themselves because they know they'll never be able to afford college. If you have the ability and the interest, you should be able to go and have a better education. It's an investment not only in the individual, but in our communities. So that is something that we feel very strongly about right now. So many people are in terrible, terrible debt, and that's foreclosing the promise of America. We have $1.5 trillion in debt, in student debt, and that stops people from being able to buy a home. It stops them from being able to start a business, and it makes them nervous about starting a family because there's so much that they have to take care of just before they start out in the hole. So he believes that we need to cancel all student debt because over the last 20 years, the cost of college education has gone exorbitantly up, raised much more than inflation. And we shouldn't have our young people having that problem. Between that and healthcare, one of the things by having those two issues addressed, it frees people up to say, I can do better. I can reach my full potential. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, or I always wanted to start a retail business, or to be an artist, or to be a teacher. And they will not have to stay in dead-end jobs that they don't enjoy, jobs that don't help them reach their full potential and don't contribute to the community, simply because they have to have a paycheck to pay off their student loans, or they have to maintain their benefits. Healthcare should be a human right, not something that is a commodity where people make profit. Okay. So anyway, Bernie has a history, a consistent history of working on behalf of the working people of America. He has consistently been a champion of unions. He's consistently been a champion of seniors. He has fought back successfully to cuts in Social Security leading the effort against the chain CPI and other cuts in Social Security. And as president, he will not only stop the cuts, but he will expand Social Security so our senior citizens. He has fought and he believes very strongly climate change is an existential threat. And we need to address it with bold vision on what other candidates are talking about. Well, President Trump denies it even exists. I know Utah understands it. But what other candidates are talking about is simply just little Band-Aids, making a little bit of difference. We absolutely have to act boldly to deal with climate change now so that it doesn't wreak havoc on our planet. There's no halfway measures on that. So he's committed to the Green New Deal. That means transferring away from fossil fuels towards renewable energies and sustainable energies, wind, solar, geothermal. I know in Utah, the skiing and snowboarding industry brings in an enormous, about 20% of your tourism dollars. And that's going to go away unless we do something. We are concerned about pollution, and I know that air quality is a concern in Utah because of the inversion. That is something that I didn't know before, and I've learned, and I thought, wow, everybody thinks Utah, clean air, beautiful environment.
No.
Clean air.
Yeah, right, dirty snow.
Yeah. So, well, that's one of the reasons that we come out. That's one of the reasons we go all over the country. We learn firsthand from the people who are experiencing the issues in their community, the problems in their community, and the solutions that they've come up with. I mean, one of the things that I look for everywhere I go is what's the issue, what's a replicable solution? And I'm hearing so many wonderful ideas from so many people across the spectrum talking about how we deal with each one of these issues. So I will go on and on. I think you know a lot about his policies. I would say to you that he has been a champion for young people, a champion for working people. His focus has always been on the working families of America and the vulnerable, including the children and the seniors. And I think what I would just say is that one of the things that I think people sour on in politics is people say one thing and then they do another once they get in office.
Yes.
That has not been the case with Bernie Sanders. He has been, and I think you can look to his home state to find out whether or not that's true. He has consistently, in the last 12 quarterly morning consult polls, they asked every state how they feel about their senator. In the last several years, he's been number 1 in the nation. Woo! Every time. So, and that just tells you the people who know him best trust him. They believe, even if we hear this all the time, because he gets 25% of the Republican vote in Vermont, and part of that is that they say, I don't agree with him on anything. But on everything, they do something. But I know what he says is what he means, and that's what he'll do. And he's working on behalf of working people. He's honest, so he's got my vote. I hear that over and over again when we go around the state, and you can count on him. I'd love to hear your ideas and your concerns and your perspectives, and bring it back to Bernie. So thank you very much for coming. Yes. We'll bring up kids. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've places that conservatives, especially hardline conservatives like those who continue to support Trump, which probably seems absurd that those people exist to us, but yeah, I've read in a lot of places that those people say they respect the facts and that they think that liberals are messy people who just want change for the sake of change. And Bernie Sanders proves that is all wrong. He supports the Green New Deal. There is scientific facts supporting that. I cannot believe that anybody would deny that it is a real issue, climate change. He does stuff that has been proven to work in multiple different scenarios, starting with his mayorship. And it's not like he just changes it to what his electorate thinks will want, and then he follows through on that, even though that might be a political strategy. He actually thinks that he has maintained it through his entire political career, and I don't really see any downfalls in him as the president.
What's your name?
Moses.
Moses, well, thank you so much for that endorsement. We really appreciate it. And I think it's wonderful how much you know about his history. I think that one of the things that people worry about also is electability. And I wanted to address that just head on and say, okay, he's already won the first 3 primaries. Yeah, he'll be 4th today. That's a tough one. You know, last time he did very, very poorly down there, but he'll do a lot better, and we hope he'll win. But the other thing, the second thing, is that he has there have been polls about everybody running against Trump since 2016. In 47 of the last 50 polls, all the polls since 2016, in 50, yeah, I'm sorry. In 47 of the last 50 polls since 2016, he has won. Bernie beats Trump. The last thing I would say in terms of electability is that when you have a president who lies, who treats people that are different than him as the other, and with bigotry, I think the best person to contrast that with is somebody who always tells the truth, and who has a compassionate, inclusionary agenda, and that's Bernie Sanders.
Hi, I'm Lindsay, and first off, before I start, I'd like to recognize that we're on sacred land, the land of the Hopi, the Ute, the Paiute, the Westashone, the Dene, and as an Afro-Chicanx Two-Spirit, there's this umbrella of things that directly affect my community. Murdered, missing Indigenous women, Indigenous sovereignty, the fact that our lands are being desecrated, both public lands and sacred lands, near the border, where predominantly white ceremonial spaces are being protected, like the Civil War and Texas Revolutionaries funerals that used to be cemeteries, but our sacred land is being destroyed, and every measure is being taken for that. And one of the things that I respect about Bernie is that he has literally put his body on the line for civil rights. And there are many issues that do affect communities of color, whether it's restrictions and barriers to education, the school to prison pipeline, the fact that we still have the 13th Amendment. And one of the things that I do trust with Bernie is that he has put his body on the line for people of color. I would like to see more done for Indigenous sovereignty. Justice reform affects every aspect of the poor, not just people of color anymore, but now the poor. And so my question is, what can we expect from Bernie as president to narrow the legislation towards protecting POC? And sort of a piggyback question to that is domestic violence. I mean, we say that we're the most wonderful and greatest nation of the earth, on the planet, but yet there are other countries that actually put their money where their mouth is by actually having clarified, comprehensive domestic violence laws like Ireland, like Scotland, like New Zealand, and yet we are not even decades behind, but centuries behind in what we should be doing to protect the most vulnerable, which are our disabled, our women, our people of color. So what can we expect when he's president to address these issues?
Thank you. I think what you can expect is he's paying attention to those issues. He has been, you've raised so many. We have been, February 14th, there was the march for missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, especially women and girls. And I went to Minneapolis to go participate in that. We just had a meeting with Native American leaders about exactly that issue, and I understand there's some legislation that is coming down the pike here in Utah that could be a model for the rest of the world. So I think the rest of the country. He has been a sponsor consistently of the Violence Against Women Act, and he has to, they have to reauthorize it and expand it now in the next, I think, 3 years, and hopefully it'll happen sooner than that. It is still in effect, but it needs to be broadened. Bernie believes, as I said, in protecting the most vulnerable, and that is women and children often, and people of two-spirit. So I think what you can expect also, he's made criminal justice reform a very strong component of his presidential candidacy and of his legislative record. He has been very supportive of expanding addressing the gun safety legislation. Since 1988, he's been supportive of an assault weapons ban, and we've gotten that through, but then there was a time limit, so then it came back. He's been named a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action and March for Our Lives, the younger people's group, have endorsed him. In terms of criminal justice, we are very aware of the school-to-prison pipeline. We're very concerned about the fact that so many people, including people here in Utah, are languishing in jail, not because they've been convicted of anything, but because they do not have enough money for cash bail. So we want to do away with cash bail. There are so many things. I would urge you to look at his website, berniesanders.com, and you'll see a very extensive criminal justice program that I think people will see is exceptional in its depth and breadth. Yes, sir.
I don't need the microphone. I like that sound. Hey, so I'm running for office up north in arguably the most conservative district in the country. I've worked in that district for Halliburton in the oil fields. In 2015, when I was working there, we had the oil bust, which about 1,000 oil field workers were laid off, but Vernal, much like Wilson, North Dakota, was the fastest growing city in the nation. And so there's all these peripheral businesses popping up, there's all these strip malls, and so they all collapsed under that as well. So it's not just the oil industry, it's also them. On top of that, I was expected to work 100-hour weeks. 100-hour weeks really robs you of kind of your awareness, and I've got thousands of pounds of tools suspended over my head on a wire line. If that snaps, like, I don't have the wherewithal to get out of the way before I'm crushed. And so we have already like an unstable energy sector that has no problems laying off thousands of workers, disrupting entire economies just so they can pay their executives outrageous prices. We also have backbreaking hours in order to do that. And so what I'd like to see, and I broke this down with John Iadarola from QIT, is just this idea that if we can move over to wind energy, geothermal, solar, we have things that are going to prevent a dip in the market from massive layoffs, from massive disrupting of these localities. But then also we can pay thriving wages where people don't have to work 100 hours a week just to put food on the table for their families. And then as a consequence, It cleans up our air and water. And so I think it's up to us, if we really are a better educated, like, voting group or voting bloc, it's up to us to reach into our lexicon and don't say climate change if it turns people off. Say, I want to put food on the table for your family. I want to create opportunities for your kids. I don't want your kid to pay on a 40-year mortgage but no house because they dare to want to aspire to education. I think that we really have the ability to draw people in and bring them in and really dismantle a lot of the propaganda and inoculate them against it, because if they hear reasonable ways to move us forward, and they see that we're putting them first as a consequence, as a happy consequence, it addresses the climate crisis, I think that we're going to find a lot more allies in this fight than we think.
That's great. I don't know how much I can add to that. That's very good advice. One of the things that this campaign is not only about electing Bernie, it's about a progressive movement to transform this country. And one of them is to away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy like wind, solar, geothermal. But the only way we accomplish that, the reason that it has to be a movement of people, is that we all need to talk to our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, our families, and listen to them too, and find common ground to say, if they're concerned about certain things, to not knock them over the head with, well, you should just vote for Bernie, but to discuss why you're voting for Bernie in that area. That's how his agenda is a people-oriented agenda. It's an agenda that says, how do I improve the quality of life for the average working family member or average working individual, and how do I improve the standard of living? How do we reprioritize the priorities of this nation away from supporting the corporate profit and more towards considering the public good? So and then to drill that down, as you say, people have concerns and they turn away from politics because you can't count on people to follow through. Bernie's record shows you definitely can believe that he will follow through, but also to point out to people, in a democracy, which is a very important, wonderful aspect of this country that doesn't exist in a lot of other places, we have to have our voices heard, and our voices are heard at the ballot box more than anything else. So we do need to vote. And people turn off and they say, I'm not going to vote, politics makes no difference. Remind them all the difference it makes. If Bernie wants a minimum wage increase to $15 an hour so that all the wages go up, and Trump and some of his allies don't even believe in any minimum wage. Let the market bear. Now, I don't know whether Trump feels that way, but so I think that what we need to do is be active in our democracy by discussing what our needs are in our communities and listening to our neighbors and respecting their point of view, but having an informed point of view yourself so that you can encourage them to think outside the box.
I haven't heard much about agriculture, and I was wondering about that. There are a lot of people that don't understand that workers in agriculture have a lower wage, minimum wage, and a lot of people of color are affected by that. And everybody has to eat. You talk about the consumption end, everybody needs to be able to get food, but what about those who are producing that food, and what kind of outlook does he have for them?
Okay, good question. And we don't talk about it enough. When he was running for office in Vermont, he was very active in supporting the family farm and supporting the dairy farmer and organic agriculture as well, sustainable agriculture. What we've done when we've gone across the country, it depends on where you go, but there's a lot of factory farming that is hurting the environment, the soil, the air, the water, and there's a lot of concern about that. And it's also putting small farms, and small is relative. I think the farms here are 65 acres and up, so that's small as opposed to factory farms. So what his feeling is that we need to not only support the farmer and help them learned through science and research, which all the farmers really understand. They do their research, they figure out how to get the best crops, how to have the most sustainable agriculture. What he wants to do is make sure that we support the family farmer for food security for the rest, for our nation. The trade deals that we've done, NAFTA, have actually hurt that. We're bringing in so many things, and in Iowa, for instance, instead of having a variety of crops, they have a lot of corn crops. And that means that the soil, after a time, is not even good for anything else. So we're talking about regenerative farming and helping people because food security in our nation is one of the most important things. So he has a agricultural policy on his website as well. It's much more extensive than what I'm talking about, but his thought is the basic premise is food security for our nation, supporting the family farmer who's doing the important work, and also are the landscape architects of our beautiful we go through all the different places and say, oh my gosh, look at these rolling hills, look at those crops, it's so gorgeous. That doesn't happen by accident, and we should be supporting the fact that they're beautifying our country as well as feeding us. That is a occupation that is extremely needed for our country, and it's dying out because people can't make it work. They can't afford to have this. And the last, I would say, when we say people of color, immigration. I mean, people are coming and then they're being detained by ICE because you can't find people who want to work those long hours and do that kind of labor, often in your own community, because the communities in rural communities have very few people. So when they bring in migrant workers from Jamaica or from anywhere else, I know that is a very strong component, and to have this Customs and Border Patrol approach, this ICE approach, that if you're an immigrant, you don't belong here, that affects our food as well as our humanity. Yes, ma'am. You might get a woman.
Quick question. So Utah is dead last in WPU for our school districts. And it's the weighted pupil.
It's the what?
The weighted pupil.
Okay.
So per child, we spend less money than anyone in the nation. Dead last, which is value our children and everything like it. And yet, public education is the best it has ever been. If it were fully funded, then you can imagine what our kids can do. So my first question is, what do you see these property taxes, of course, give us more to the wealthy areas, and our poor kids who need a little more help have less money. So what is going to level the playing field as far as our public education goes? And the second question is, when Bernie's elected, and if we are not able to flip the Senate, I think that the biggest problem I see for me personally is the rollback on women's rights. I lived through the 70s once, not anxious to do it again. And then I feel like we're fighting the battles all over again. So what is the plan if we aren't able to build the Senate to protect women's rights?
Okay, good points.
Thank you for coming to this shiny red state. So many supporters here.
Thank you. Well, you raise a number of things. Education, K through 12, as I said at the outset, we need to reinvest in it, in education. We need to ensure, Bernie wants to ensure that no teacher makes less than $60,000 a year. But he knows that's not on the backs of the property taxpayers. That just doesn't work. So we need to, as a country, reinvest in education. We used to, and even higher education when I was young was free. So this is crazy that we're not doing that. In some states it was free. So his feeling is, first, the Secretary of Education will not be Betsy DeVos. it will be, we hope to, across the board, bring in people who have experience from the sector in which they're governing. So our Secretary of Education will have somebody that has public school experience in terms of teaching, administering, being a professor, but people that understand the system, as opposed to what we see with the current administration is bringing in all the people, and previous ones, unfortunately, at various times, bringing in Goldman Sachs and businessmen and people who are interested in profit and trying to run everything like a business, as opposed to saying, okay, like we all do, we look at our budget, we prioritize what we can afford and what we can't afford, and if we look at it from the standpoint of what works on behalf of improving the quality of life for the average individual, including improving our communities, improving our cities and states, instead of improving the corporate bottom line, I think we'll have different priorities and we'll be able to move the budget around to address those. So education is a top priority. In terms of women, you're right, we're going in exactly the wrong direction, and that's why Bernie decided to run again this time. We honestly didn't think we were going to do it. We did it. We raised a lot of issues. We were pleased to have them become part of the national conversation about where we need to go as a country. But looking at who was thinking about running and who had already announced, we just felt that he was the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump. And that
he is.
Thank you. And the thing is that we cannot afford, the country cannot afford another 4 years of this presidency. Women certainly can. But it's not just women's rights. I mean, we are, there's the Supreme Court. Another appointment to that will bring us light years away. It's our democracy. It's whether or not we treat people with respect and honor the innate dignity of every individual and recognize we all are part of a common humanity, or we treat others as we see them treated now. I think right now there's a lot of anxiety in the country. There's a lot of stress, we heard it to begin with immigrant communities because of deportation. Now more and more immigrant communities are being forced out. New populations every couple of weeks. He'll add another group that he thinks should be gone, whether it's the Haitians or the Hmong, as well as all the people from Latin America and Central America. So, but women are feeling a very strong opposition, in terms of being less than. So I would just urge you to think the only way to beat him and the only way to take our country back is to participate fully in democracy. Talk not about blame, not about anger, but about hope and vision for the future. So that was it.
We have time for exactly one more question. Sorry to interrupt. And then we've got a picture.
I'm so sorry because this isn't a question, but I want to tell you from the deepest part of my heart how grateful I am that Bernie is running, because as someone who has children, and I'm sorry because my heart has just been so full to be able to be here, is when I feel like the world is at a boiling point, when I see what's going on globally with climate change, and I see what's, I can drive the streets of this country and see people living in pure poverty, and I see the hope in the American dream going away. I am so grateful that he is willing to battle this country, battle the media, battle the Democratic Party. It means everything to me and my family, and I just wanted to express that before.
I think working together honestly, working together, we can transform this country. We can have a quality of life that everybody can enjoy. It's not about free things. It's not about pipe dreams. In 2016, Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, higher education being tuition-free at public colleges and universities. We're all told very out front, that will never happen. Well, minimum wage has increased in 40 cities and 7 states. And Medicare for all is what everybody is talking about. And it's actually, I want to give you one talking point for that in terms of Yale epidemiologists just did a study that showed the Medicare for all programs that Bernie has brought will save $450 billion a year and 68,000 lives compared to the current system. So, and then the tuition-free colleges and universities is happening in various places as well. So don't think we as a country don't deserve this. As a people in the richest country in the history of the world, we should be able to do what every other country, every other industrialized country does. I mean, universal health care, how does Belgium do it? How does France do it? How does UK do it? How does Canada do it? And we can't? That's crazy. What we need to do is get the profit out of the main focus of healthcare and prescription drugs. So I would just say, honestly, it's a movement. If we work together, we can do this. And I appreciate so much the work that each of you are doing in your own communities. And thank you so much for inviting me here. Bernie is coming on Monday. He's looking forward to it. I hope you'll join us. Thank you.
If everybody wants to stay here,
Come up here.
or go up there, whatever's easier.
Hannah can come up here, and then everybody just sits and moves to the middle. We can take it.
Perfect.
Short in the front, tall in the back. Short in the front, tall in the back.
They're sitting. It's okay.
I think everybody just needs to squeeze close.
You guys can come a little bit.
Excuse me.
Come on, everybody. Kids, come on up front.
Yes. Closer, closer.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. I love that. Oh, good. Show that.
Oh.
Everybody, can you get everybody in?
Yes. All right. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Thank you.
And the program's going to continue, so just please go back to your seats. We have some amazing speakers. Yes, and just one more round of applause for Dr. Jane Sanders.
All right, so I just want to thank Dr. Jane Sanders for being here as she leaves. I also want to thank our awesome audience members who were able to participate in that Q&A. Everybody did a really good job, so give each other a pat on the back real quick. And then we'll move into the next part of our program, which is going to be this beautiful video. So give us just a moment there.
look around and find someone you don't know. Are you willing to fight for that person who you don't?
One second, everybody. Cool. All right, so like I said, I will speak now. Again, my name is Family Douglas Atchison. I am a member of the church. And without further ado, I'm going to start my remarks. Joseph Smith Jr. once said, and I quote, "One of the grand fundamental principles of Mormonism is to receive truth, let it come from whence it may," end quote. So as we continue this meeting, let us take the wisdom from Doctrine and Covenants 93 that, quote, "all truth is independent in that sphere which God has placed it to act for itself," end quote, and affirm that truth in our hearts and our minds so we can be receptive to the truths and ideas our speakers, including myself, will be sharing with all of us gathered here today. I want to talk to you today about Bernie Sanders, but before I get to Bernie, I would like to share about my grandfather, Doug. He was a rare, gentle man. He believed in the doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but above all, radical tolerance was his policy. He could fix anything with duct tape and bypass just about anything else with whatever he had on hand. He was a sentimental type, and despite moving hundreds, if not over 1,000 times in the course of his life, he kept a hold of all the possessions his children and grandchildren had ever gifted to him. Now, he did make some severe mistakes, as all men do, but ultimately, he did everything in his power to atone for them. Today, I have no doubt in my mind that he has a seat at the table of Christ. And in case you couldn't tell by the past tense verbiage, he's dead. Grandpa died in 2017 because he had to choose. His freedom of choice was to choose two of the following three drugs: insulin, heart attack medicine, stroke medicine. He knew going off any one of these would increase his likelihood of an earlier death. Yet because of pharmaceutical profits and the prices necessary to sustain them, he could only choose two. Ultimately, Grandpa chose to go off the medicine that would have prevented strokes. Sorry. He thought dying from a stroke would be less painful than dying from a heart attack or a sugar coma. And he died from a stroke not many months after he made that decision. And I don't share this to wallow in mourning, but to point out that there is an easy policy solution that would have saved him. It's far cheaper, more fiscally responsible, and better than the system we have now. And it works. In fact, this kind of policy solution is half the cost, and according to the Yale study, Dr. Jane Sanders mentioned earlier today, would save 68,000 American lives a year. The policy I speak of provides true freedom of choice for all Americans, regardless of circumstance or income, and it has a name: Medicare for All. Medicare for All ends co-pays, deductibles, co-insurances, premiums, out-of-pocket maximums, etc. for all care, would cover health, dental, vision, hearing, and in-home care. It solves the donut hole for prescriptions on current Medicare, and has no out-of-pocket costs for that regular regimen of comprehensive care, with prescriptions capped at $200 a year per household. This is known as a single-payer health system. For those of you not familiar, 30 plus other countries have universal health care, and a strong majority of which use a single-payer health system as their method of implementation for that universal health care. Under Medicare for All, you could choose any doctor you want, any hospital you want, any pharmacy, any clinic, and so on, and it's covered. Yes, the Medicare tax increases a little bit to pay for it, but what is an insurance premium if not a tax you pay to a private insurance or insurance company for the pleasure of being insured? And before we really dive into Bernie Sanders, I have a plethora of quotes. First, I'm going to quote Jesus Christ. This is from Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon, end quote. That was, again, Matthew 6:24. For those that don't know, mammon can simply be defined as wealth, or more accurately, as wealth as a source of influence or covetousness. There's a for my fellow members who want to look at one of our leaders' words on the subject, the handout that we passed out does have a decent definition of mammon. So Christ literally told us we could serve our Heavenly Father or wealth. There's no middle ground on this. We have to choose, and the law is quite clear. Another quote from Jesus Christ. This is from Mark chapter 10, quote, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God," end quote. Another quote from Brigham Young. "A good man is a good man, whether in this church or out of it," quote unquote. And before I really dig into Bernie Sanders, there's one more issue I'd like to briefly discuss. Money and politics. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said in his second inaugural speech, fun fact about FDR, he was a democratic socialist, or more accurately, a social democrat like Bernie Sanders, and he was elected 4 times. He was so popular, they had to put in presidential term limits to stop him from getting elected over and over and over again. FDR was also the architect of many New Deal programs, many of which have been significantly underfunded or gotten rid of, but some we still rely on today. Interstates came from the New Deal. Medicare came from the New Deal. Medicaid to a degree, Medicare came from the Civil Rights Movement, but Medicaid to a degree came from the New Deal. So a lot of these social parts of our social safety net came from FDR. So you can go ahead and quote it. Quote, "We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace. Business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, and war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. We now know that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. Never before in all our history have these forces been so united against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred." End quote. After all, given their corrupting influence on our social contract and Jesus Christ's word on the matter, should we not all welcome the hatred of the 1% and serve our fellow humans rather than the forces and powers of wealth? Regardless of personal and political persuasions, I think we can all gathered here agree that money in politics is a big issue, and even so far as the fruit of so many other issues. I mean, campaign. Bernie Sanders is the only candidate running for president who has never, in the course of their career, taken legal bribes, also known as campaign contributions from organized money. He's 100% and has always been 100% grassroots funded. In fact, he has over 6 million individual campaign donations from over 2 million individual donors, at an average donation around $19. Now, I'm no math whiz, but that's a lot of dough. And he didn't have to sell his soul to get there. In fact, his integrity and policy are exempted by so many people, including myself, hopefully including some of the people in this room, support Senator Sanders so passionately. One more scripture here. Let us think of the parable of the Good Samaritan and how that parable would align with who Bernie is. This is Luke 10, chapter 10, 25 through 37. Quote, "And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right, this do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came upon where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds. They took out 2 pence, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said,
I want you all to take a look around.
I apologize.
You're good. Said unto the host, Take care of him, and whatever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee.
Sorry. Just trying to find.
Mute it. Which now of these three thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that shewed mercy on him. Then Jesus said unto him, Go and do thou likewise. The Jews were taught by their society at the time to fear and hate Samaritans. Likewise, in our society, we are taught to fear and hate anyone with the label socialist. I am well studied in political science, including left theory, and I can tell you, again, Bernie is not a socialist. He's more of a social democrat. As such, he is simply a good man who has been labeled as such and embraced the label, because he welcomes their hatred, to delegitimize every good thing he's ever tried to do. And even if I'm wrong, maybe Bernie is a socialist and not a social democrat, the allegory of the Samaritan still applies, and we should always judge a person by the fruits of their labors rather than their labels. For example, in a recent rally, a woman fell down due to the heat, and Bernie did not hesitate to stop speaking and rush down and give the lady her water, his water, I mean. He interrupted his own rally to make sure that this woman would be okay. As another recent example, a veteran told Bernie at a rally that his medical debt was so inescapable and crushing, he was going to kill himself. Bernie told him they'd talk at the end, and they did. At a later rally, that same veteran had to travel a ways to get there. He tried to give Bernie his flight jacket as a token of thanks for saving his life. Bernie refused that gift because of its personal importance, and the veteran had earned it, whereas Bernie had not. Bernie is a man who cares deeply about all his fellow humans and ensuring the social contract works for all. The framers, flawed as they were, did leave us with a social contract that has long since evolved, and Bernie seeks to restore and expand the American dream for all, regardless of identity or how you look, how you live, how you love. Bernie wants to restore it for all of us. Furthermore, Bernie isn't running against a Democrat or Republican per se. Rather, he is running against a system that has been rigged, that leaves working families like ours behind and squelches the very idea of prosperity. Our establishment powers have overseen a corporate takeover of this land. This takeover has meant that in real wages adjusted for inflation, the average worker makes less today than they did 40 years ago. Despite technology and innovation that has multiplied worker productivity many times over. It has meant that private prisons have a hand in writing our criminal justice laws and regulations and are codifying their own profits instead of the idea of justice. It has meant that healthcare, rather than being about treatment, is about denying care to expand profits. The human cost of this takeover cannot be overstated. My grandfather was one of 68,000 a year on the issue of healthcare alone, and we face so many issues. Ultimately, this takeover has meant the ideas of fairness and common purpose, while only ever implemented for some, have been replaced wholesale with the ideas of greed and avarice across our government. And Brigham Young once said, quote, "If a nation transgresses wholesome laws and oppresses any of its citizens or another nation, until the cup of its iniquity is full, through acts that are perfectly under its own control, God will hurl those who are in authority from their power, and they will be forgotten, and he will take another people, though poor and despised, a hiss and a byword among the popular nations, and instill into them power and wisdom, and they will increase and prosper until they in turn become a great nation on the earth." End quote. I firmly believe that this movement of the working and middle classes, the poor, the marginalized, is a literal manifestation of God instilling power and wisdom unto a new people and rendering the powers that be, the establishment as it were, powerless to stop this evolution, the peaceful revolution. In closing, let me say that Bernie's policies, as we've discussed today, even beyond Medicare for All, do take a very secular approach to care for the least of these, like Christ would have us do, while saving the country money overall, up to about $19 trillion in 10 years. Thank you for your time and open minds, my beloved siblings.
I don't know how to get it here.
Okay, okay.
I've got it here. You just drag it.
Let's stay one more. Okay. Transition it. Up next, we're going to hear from Bernie Sanders by the magical wonders of technology with this next video. Transition.
It won't let me. The mouse disappears.
Yeah, it does. So you have to unmute the computer, and then you have to turn the
mouse, when it's in here, is actually over there. So you actually have to drag it all the way back over. And then hit.
All right, up next is Grace Parola Davis, who will be speaking to us live and in the flesh. Come on up, Grace.
Hello. Okay, brothers and sisters, good afternoon. Mabuti po. I am so honored to be here. Actually, this is my second time to speak for Senator Bernie Sanders' event. And this is such a wonderful opportunity because I am his avid fan and supporter way back in 2016. And I did not have to look for answers from other people to try to persuade me why I support Bernie Sanders. I support him because he's an incredible human being, a leader who can resonate with all of us and all of our needs. Before I begin with my speech, I would like to introduce to you my name. I'm Grace Parola Davis, and I am originally from the Philippines. I came here 20 years ago, this June, when I got married to my husband, Mark. He's sitting back there, taking my video. Thank you, Mark. As a new immigrant, I had so many questions in my mind as to why attaining college degree here was so elusive. It was a total shock for me that everything was for profit, even the education, and most importantly, healthcare. I am here to tell you that in the Philippines, a developing country, college education is for free. Now, we don't want to hear the word for free, but it's paid by our taxes. Take note, it's a developing country. I earned my degree there. I got my bachelor's degree in elementary education 4 years without getting into a lot of debt. When I came here, I worked with these people who also had the same degree. And they told me, well, they're buried into a lot of debt. It's not just a 4-year degree, but getting your associate's degree is a lot of work. You have to take a lot of them to be able to afford it. And since then, I started asking myself, what's going on? Because my perception of the United States when I was in the Philippines was that this is a rich country and everybody wanted to come here because, hey, this is the land of milk and honey. And if you've never been to the Philippines, that is the perception of the people here. So I have to tell my family, you have to live here. Every one of us work hard here. Americans are the most hardworking people. And I admire the working traits of the people here. Now, some people I know here try to argue with me. Hey, why do we need college degree? Why do we have to make it affordable for everyone? We need to earn it. And some people would say, I have a high-paying job already. I don't even have a degree. Why do I have to go to college? So I have to tell them, you know what? We live in a civilized society where we have teachers, we need social workers, doctors. What will happen if we don't have affordable college tuition? Our community will not function. It will deteriorate. That's why I said you might not want to go to college. It's okay. But it should be affordable for everyone. That is how a civilized society should work. Now, I was required when I was there when I came here to take free classes. And fortunately, I passed the test. So I could get my teaching license. And I was so happy, about it. I've been teaching here for 14 years already. In the richest country on earth, why does one have to work several jobs? And yet are faced with uncertainty. And I know a lot of us could relate with this, because I have a family. I have 2 boys. I have a husband who went to school right after we got married. I know exactly, how each one of us feel, and I know you guys could relate with me. American, they say, hey, it cannot be done. You know what, it is too hard. But you know what, yes, it can be done. If you look outside of the box, outside of this country, a lot of countries provide affordable college tuition. More importantly, Medicare for all. In the richest country on earth, we should not be asking these questions. We should be enjoying the fruit of our labor. We pay our taxes. Yeah. We do, right? Yeah. Yes, we do. So we are part of building this country. Why is it that only the 1/10 of the 1% should benefit from it and not us when we are part of the working class? Why are we the only ones being taxed? Now, I was thinking that our youth cannot afford this ridiculously high college tuition on top of facing the reality of having to afford housing and then putting food on their table. Our youth is the hope of this country. And I have 2 boys, children of my own. One is Simon, who is over there, he's 18 years old, and another one is 16. I want them to have a better future. I don't want them to when they get to 25 years old, to be buried into a lot of debt and not have to start a family yet. Our taxes should be put to good use. Do you all agree with me? Yes. Yes. Everyone should benefit from our taxes instead of just the 1% of the 1/10 of the population here. Now they said, hey, these self-made millionaires, they are self-made. There's no such thing as self-made, without profiting from those people who sacrifice, who worked hard to put food on their table. The next one, when I first came here, I asked myself, why do people have to give up all their earthly possession to afford Medicare for all? For a simple problem such as chest pain, if not file for bankruptcies. I have witnessed my friends in their old age who got cancer and getting a divorce, listen to this, getting a divorce was the only option in order to qualify for Medicaid so they could get the treatment they needed. I can just imagine the compounding stress that my friends had to endure instead of focusing on the recovery. Some of them passed away. She passed away back in 2014 as a result of not getting the care she needed. I was thinking that if she could have lived in a different major country, she would still probably be alive. She would be enjoying, the benefits of having to work all her life. But then, something different just, occurred. Now, I would like to tell you, based from my experience, I believe that Medicare should not be for profit. It should be affordable for all of us. When I was 25 years old, I gave birth by cesarean section, and my cost, my bill was $25,000 on top of having my insurance. So they told me you have to pay at least $4,000 from that. I have 2 boys, both cesarean sections, and that was like $8,000. So if you are a 25-year-old new mom, and you have a husband who's going to school full-time, and you're trying to make ends meet as a family, and you're earning $9 per hour, how would you live? How would you survive? What would be your lifestyle be like? Of course, you will be living in a lot of stress. Can anyone relate with me here? Please raise your hand. So we don't need to ask for solutions from other people. We should draw it from our personal experience. And that's how I'm drawn to Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders resonates with me. I was like, back in 2016, when I heard him, I was like, he is the man who answered all my questions. And since then, I was drawn to him with his policies, because I know that he is here fighting for all of us, the working class. Now, in the Philippines, we have a PhilHealth there. Everyone has a PhilHealth card. You do not have to argue with health insurance. You just go there and take your PhilHealth card, and they help you. It is particularly gauged to the marginalized sector in the society, those people who could not help themselves. And I always remember what Bernie Sanders said, that, you know what, we measure a country not by the wealth, not by the billionaire class, but we measure the country by how we treat the most vulnerable people in our society, by how we take care of them. We do not measure the strength of the country by the extravagance of lifestyle that I know, you guys know, most of the leaders of this country are living. Now, I am so happy that he is here to fight for us. I know that a lot of you, some of you have questions. Hey, he is a socialist. And we associate his socialism with communism. You know what? If he is a communist, he would never offer a free college tuition. Do you remember Khmer Rouge during World War II in Cambodia? They tried to kill people even if you wear glasses. They tried to annihilate because they don't want intellectuals there. So Bernie Sanders is not a communist. He is here for all of us. He wants to offer affordable college tuition for all the people. I would like to talk about the Savior, since I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints too. When he was on earth, he taught us to love and serve one another. After his fast and his encounter with Satan, Jesus began his public ministry. He came to earth after not only to die for us, but also to teach us how to live. He taught that there are 2 great commandments. First, to love God with all your heart, mind, and strength. And second, to love others as we love ourselves. His life is an example of how we should obey these 2 commandments. If we love God, we will trust and obey Him. But it doesn't end there. We should not just be all talk about loving God. He said we should also love others and help them meet their physical and spiritual needs. How could we do that? By changing the COVID system that we have in this country. Jesus spent his life serving others. He cured them of diseases. He made the blind see, the deaf hear, and the lame walk. Once when he was healing the sick, it became late and the people were hungry. What did he do? Instead of driving them away, sending them away, he blessed 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, and miraculously was able to feed a multitude of 5,000 people. He thought that whenever we find people hungry, cold, naked, or lonely, we should help them all we can. When we help others, we are serving the Lord. Jesus loved others with all his heart. Often his heart was full of compassion that he wept. He loved little children, the elderly, the humble, simple people who had faith in him. All these scripture passages resonate with the beliefs of Senator Bernie Sanders, especially his stance on social justice and economic justice. He stands that the economy here should work for every one of us, and not just for the 1/10 of the 1% of the population. Social justice was what our Savior emphasized during his earthly ministry. Senator Bernie Sanders possesses the remarkable traits of a great leader who puts his countrymen above himself. He has proven time and time again I echo Senator Bernie Sanders when he said that, like what I said, a great nation is not judged historically by the number of billionaires it has or by the number of nuclear weapons it has. It is judged by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable people amongst us. I am passionate about his policies because I have 2 sons who I am fighting for. Now, how can we help him win this race? All we have to do is go out there and talk to the people that we know, our friends and family. We should not hesitate why we support him. We should debunk the beliefs that socialism associated with communism. We need to clear that with them. We need to talk to them. Canvas, we still have a chance. We canvas every day, all across, Utah, in Salt Lake, and we phone bank in Murray from 4 to 6. So if you would like to help, you are always welcome to go there, and we could donate to his campaign. That is all we can do. Now, I want you guys to join me in cheering, us, not me, 3 times. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Us, not me. Us, not me. Us, not me. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Great, that's fun. I'll pick that back out. And we're going to leave that down for a second. We're just going to leave it down. Just leave it right there. Sorry to everybody on the live stream. Gravity happened, but we still should have. Okay, just got to fix this camera. Okay. Once I'm done fixing the camera feed, we will have our next speaker. Her name is Amanda Berg. She could not be here physically, so we have a video that she recorded for us. And my apologies to those watching on the live stream who couldn't hear the last video. That should be resolved for this video. Can you see the whole field? Mm-hmm. All right. That's my friend. Mm-hmm. Okay. Start her video over. Hit play.
And here.
And hit
He
send.
gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. Naked and you clothed me. Sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we an hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer them and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. These are the words of Jesus Christ. These are the words of the person we are all trying to emulate and become like in this life and in the next. And I love him and I love his gospel, and because I love his gospel, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. Now, I'm not just voting for him because he's a socialist Jew who just so happened to have been a carpenter, though those parallels are pretty uncanny. I'm voting for him because his message and platform are one with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Healing the sick, feeding the hungry. These are things that Jesus Christ did during his ministry. The scriptures never called them handouts, and everything he did during his ministry, he did as an example for us to follow. And do we? Not well enough. I work in medicine. I have seen the disparities that exist in healthcare firsthand. I have patients in the Navajo Reservation in southern Utah that don't have running water or electricity. I had a patient with an oxygen condenser, which is a machine that takes room air and filters out the oxygen. And she couldn't charge it because she didn't have electricity. Our doctor physically wrote her a prescription for electricity. I don't know if she was ever able to get it, but he told her, if you don't get this electricity, you will die. You will not get your oxygen. That just shouldn't happen. I had a patient come to a free clinic I help at in Midvale, uninsured patient, and he was having a heart attack. We did an EKG. We found that he was having a massive heart attack. We told him he needed to go to the ER. He said he could not because he was uninsured. And ultimately the nurse told him, either you go to the ER, you get a $10,000 bill there, or you die, and your family has a $10,000 funeral bill. Ultimately, he went to the ER, and I'm sure it was far more than a $10,000 bill. I had a patient cry to me on the phone. He was on short-term disability. He was a welder. He said that he couldn't afford health insurance and food because he was on short-term disability. He wasn't employed full-time. And he was on this disability due to his heart condition. So what did he choose? Health insurance. He told me, I don't mind eating top ramen. I do not like eating it every meal every day. No 62-year-old welder in Rock Springs, Wyoming deserves to live with that kind of lack of dignity. No human being deserves to live with that kind of lack of dignity. These are not just patients to me. These are hardworking, good people. These are our brothers and sisters. These are beloved children of God. And in the society that Jesus Christ envisioned, stories like this wouldn't exist. But in our society, they do. And these are just 3 of the seemingly endless number of stories that I could share. Even then, they're just the ones that I personally have experienced. Think about how many EMTs and nurses and doctors exist in this country, with each many, many stories about patients suffering or even dying due to our greedy, un-Christ-like, corrupt healthcare system. And lest we forget, these disparities are exacerbated very greatly by the rampant income and wealth inequality that exists in our society, another issue that Bernie is very committed to conquering. Jesus Christ believed that healthcare was a human right and not a privilege. This is how he lived his life. This is why I support the only candidate who's been fighting for the least of these, my brethren, ever since twice the length of my lifetime. Bernie may not be a Christian by name, but he's the most Christ-like candidate I've ever seen. Don't mind my dogs barking in the background. He does not bow at the feet of money changers. He does not allow pride or greed to control him. He is humble, kind, and empathetic. And at a rally I went to in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, he, Michael Moore, and Nina Turner all spoke, and they had one common theme, which was love and compassion. They all used these words, not just the idea. They specifically said that the basis of this campaign and of Bernie Sanders' platform is love and compassion. And this is how Jesus Christ's life had the same theme, and so ours should as well. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, if ye have not charity, ye are nothing, for charity never faileth. Wherefore, cleave unto charity, which is the greatest of all, for all things must fail. But charity is the pure love of Christ, and it endureth forever. And whoso is found possessed of it at the last day, it shall be well with him. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, pray unto the Father with all energy of heart, that ye may be filled with this love, which he hath bestowed upon all who are true followers of Christ. That ye may become the sons of God, and that when he shall appear, we shall be like him. For we shall see him as he is, that we may have this hope, that we may be purified even as he is pure. Amen. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me.
Sorry about that, guys. So give it up for Amanda Bird. All right. We are almost to the fun part, which is the intermission of ice cream. But before we get there, we're going to have 2 more speakers, starting with Jennifer Chapin-Mesto, and then followed by Tom Taylor, and we'll have a video, and our concluding speaker will come on up. So everyone, please welcome Jennifer. Go that way too, if you don't want to step over the kids. Okay. Okay.
Got it.
There you are. Oh, sorry.
So can you hear me without the mic?
Yes.
I'm a hand talker. So, my name is Jennifer Musto, and I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints since I got baptized when I was 16. I wrote this wonderful talk that I practiced numerous times while I've been taking my dog on a walk, and I couldn't print it, and then I tried to bring it up on my phone. Nope. So it's a good thing I'm an actress too, huh? So I want you to know that when Phelan asked me to speak, I thought, what do I bring to this party? I don't know. Most of us are burners, and if you're not, yes. But I decided that I do have a message for you. Hey, Craig, can you bring my drink? This is my husband, Craig. And he's here instead of fishing, so it's like a huge deal. I decided that I did have something to say. Thank you. It's tea, not bourbon. Anyway, I decided that I was going to talk to you about how to talk to people who don't agree with us. I have 3 things I want you to remember as you listen to this. Number 1, our DNA is an amazing amount of information. It means that you have your red hair from your grandmother and this cute button nose from your great-grandfather, and you have small feet. But one of the other things that DNA does is that it actually records thoughts and feelings and beliefs and terrors and even experiences from our ancestors. And so those things that our ancestors have are already programmed into our DNA. I want you to remember that when you're talking to people. The other thing is that, as we all know, we have been completely agendized with our media. We have Fox and their friends on the right, and MSNBC and CNN on the left, and we are a divided country. And we know this. We can't go to a family activity when there's somebody that doesn't agree with us, that we don't hear what they're telling us. Is that right? So, I want you to remember that oftentimes it's DNA and then it's also media. The third thing I want to mention is that when we are talking with people that we don't agree with, we have, oh, that's great. I love spotlights. The third thing is that when we have conversations with people, we are only responsible for the input. What we bring to the conversation is ours. The output, what they bring back, we have no control over. Okay? So I want you to remember those 3 things. First, I want to tell you a story. And I'm a crier, so sorry. I wore waterproof mascara just in case. So I have a best friend. She's been my best friend for 16 years. She is not a member of the church, and she is not a member of my political party. However, we've been able to forge this wonderful communication. A couple of weeks ago, we went to lunch, and we started chatting, and she said, I don't want to talk about politics. And I said, okay. And then about 5 minutes into the lunch, she said, tell me which countries even work when they're socialist. So I knew that's what she wasn't really asking me, so I didn't come up with the list. But what's one of the lists? Tell me. Tell me some of those countries.
Norway.
Sweden.
Bolivia.
France. Right, good. So I did not give her that list because what would have happened had I started listing that? There would have been contention and there's no point. So I said the second worst thing. And I said we actually have a lot of social systems here in America that work, like libraries and streets and the military. How do you think that went over? Not so great, because I was throwing facts at her, and she didn't want to know those facts. Because she told me in our next lunch, which was on Wednesday, I told her, I said, you're going to be part of my presentation, and she said, oh, good. Because she and I are both rather proud of the fact that we've been able to have this great relationship, even though we have quite a few things we don't agree with. But I said I wanted to encourage people to have kindness and compassion when we're talking with people that we don't agree with. And so in the car on the way to lunch, she said very quietly, I'm afraid of socialism. And of course, it's so easy for us to say, oh, you don't have to be afraid of it. It's awesome. And it's not even socialism. It's democratic socialism, right? But how does that go over? Not so great. So you know what I said to her? From my heart, I said, I know you're afraid. And that's because she was my friend. But that's also because she's someone I care about. She's another human, and she has fears. And so when she asked me, which countries even work, she didn't want to talk about those countries. She didn't want that answer. She wanted me to look inside and say, I know you're afraid. So when I did, there was this cohesion between us. So, and I told her, I said, this kind of compassion that I have for you is what I'm going to talk about to these people. So we went to lunch, and I told her about the debacle that the last debate was. And we giggled and laughed, and I said, be sure to look at this and be sure to look at that. And we talked and talked and talked, and finally I said, when Bernie is the candidate, who would you like to see as his vice president? And I was that was a little iffy for me. And she said, Tulsi Gabbard. And I said, why? And she said, because I really have resonated a lot with what she said. Remember, Tulsi's a Democrat, right? And this woman has been raised in a very Republican background, so she's got the nature and the nurture of the Republican tide. She says, Tulsi Gabbard, I investigated her. I like what she has to say. I never thought my friend would ever have anything good to say about a Democrat. But I had created that environment, and she said, here's the reasons why. And I thought, this is amazing. So I want to tell you another story, because we have several populations that we are at odds with, don't we? So we have the Republicans, but we also have every single person who does not agree with us being burners, right? There's so many candidates right now. And so we are talking to people, and then Republicans, and then people who like the president, because there's like a whole different, they're a different breed. So when we're talking to people, and then a lot of the burners have this idea that we fight. We're angry. We're going to stay angry. So I was on this Facebook group, and I belong to many of them, and this one man said, I think we need to be kind, and I could see him bringing that little idea and putting it on the table as quietly as he could, probably knowing what was going to happen, and you can only imagine what did happen. There were so many people, no, we've got to fight, we're angry, we've got this pull from us before 2016, and we're not going to let it die. But I actually believe in kindness. I believe in the tenets of our Savior Jesus Christ as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I said, actually, I do believe in kindness, and I think it's a really good idea. So this man came to me, he replied to me on Facebook, and you know that bolds your name, so you're like, whoo, this is for me. So I read it, and it's like, you blankety blank, how could you think that? We need to fight, and emoji, hashtag, and I'm an empath, so I actually felt like he punched me in the stomach. I mean, I felt kind of, so I took a breath, and then I said to him, I really admire your passion. You really understand what we're needing to do here. I said, I actually consider kindness a stronger power because it has lasting power. But I really admire how much you love Bernie Sanders and that you're really willing to go to war for him. Because isn't Bernie Sanders like the most amazing warrior we've ever seen? He is. So, but as I talked to him, I said, I actually think that kindness has staying power. And I could see his anger level go from like 87 to around 62. And then I said, you know what I really like about you? And what I see that we have this common ground is that we both love our country. And we're both so grateful that we vote. So these are the things that we actually agree on. And then he backed down and he said, I'm going to do me, but I think you should do you. So by this time we were about to 20, right? We were getting along. And then I said, where are you from, blah, blah, blah. And he starts saying, oh, I'm from San Francisco. And I said, well, my goodness, my husband and I think we're going to San Francisco for our 25th wedding anniversary. And he said, oh, congratulations on the 25. I work at a restaurant, and it's getting a Michelin star. And if you wear a Bernie button, I'll give you free food. So I started out with blankety blank, 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 angry, 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 to free food. I mean, how great is that, right? So, I realized that the system of asking questions, doing active listening, so asking questions back, starting to build common ground, and then praising him worked. So I want to tell you another story. I run a nonprofit called Front Row Reviewers, and I was speaking with one of my reviewers who was in Southern California, or Southern Utah. Her husband is very ill, and she sent me a personal message, and this is like the topic that we come up against with, besides socialism. What's the other topic that we always hear from people on the right? Abortion. So she personal messaged me and she said, I could never vote for someone who approves of abortion. Again, I gave the wrong answer, and I said, well, Bernie Sanders has so many great plans from people for people who are before they're even born, because he wants health care for all, up until we're dead, with so many different programs that we can benefit from. I threw facts at her again, didn't I? Not a good idea. Now, the abortion one is one we may not be able to get over with those that are being told by the right, you're murdering innocent babies. That one may be one that we cannot win, but I should have said, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. I know it's one that a lot of people struggle with. But again, I would have said, but what you and I both have in common, besides being members of the church, is that we love our country and we want to vote. And we're grateful for the country that we have. And I honor you, and I'm grateful you shared this with me. And I think you're a great American. That's what I should have said, but I'm ready for the next one. So the thing is what I'm saying is, when we talk to people that don't agree with us, start asking questions. What is it about socialism that bothers you? And don't start saying, oh, well, here's why you don't. Ask and listen, and then parrot back what you've heard. So what you're saying is you think that our taxes are going to go through the roof. Is that right? Oh, so you're afraid that they're going to take all our guns, which has nothing to do with socialism, but they kind of go in that whole right rant. And you say, oh, so you're concerned that we are going to lose some of our gun rights. Is that right? As soon as we start listening and parroting back, a lot of the animosity goes away, which is super important, right? So what I have found is as I use this system with anybody that doesn't agree with me, The reason, I'm going to pull this back to Bernie Sanders. First of all, if we are kind to these people, whether they follow the man in the White House, whether they have another Democrat candidate that they prefer, when they go to that voting box and Bernie Sanders, it's between Bernie Sanders and the man in the White House, and they remember that we had strong feelings for our country, but we had caring for them and their ideas and their feelings as well. What do you think? Maybe they'll reconsider. Maybe by the time Bernie is there and he has shown so many people how the man in the White House does not have good policies for our country and how he's making it so difficult for so many people to live good lives, they might do that X for Bernie Sanders. And that's why I think it's important that we are kind. I do have one quote from President Monson that I really, well, maybe I will. Anyway, I'm just gonna say it. And President Monson, as all of the prophets, have really encouraged us to be kind and compassionate. And I loved what some of the videos have said too. Bernie Sanders is a strong-minded, strong-worded warrior, but he's also totally preaching about loving each other. He's coming up with systems to show that he cares about everyone, and that's what he wants too. And so even though when we come up with our brother-in-law who wears a Trump shirt to church, he loves him so much, we do have the opportunity to treat them with respect because they have just as much passion as we do. So that's the middle ground. We care about our country. We are all good Americans. No matter what we believe, we're involved in the process, and that's the important part. So as we treat people with kindness, and we listen to them and validate them, we don't know what's going to happen in the voting booth, do we? We don't. I do want to bear my testimony that I'm grateful for the church and for what it's brought me. I'm grateful that I have found a president candidate who coincides so much with my beliefs in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm grateful for all of you that are here, and I'm grateful for all of us that are trying to get Bernie Sanders into the White House. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Oh.
You know what? I'm going to try and make this quick because I feel like there's a lot of anxiousness in the room, and we probably want to eat some ice cream. So I'm going to make this really fast. Okay. My name's Tom Taylor. I'm a robotics engineer. I got a PhD in robotics at the University of Utah. My kind of political journey, it started in 2012. I would drive out with my wife to go knock doors for Obama. And in 2018, I was one of the Democratic candidates against Mia Love. And right now, I'm really, really trying to get Bernie Sanders elected here. I'm a victory captain for him, and I try to organize canvassing events and everything like that. So like I said, I have a PhD in robotics, and science has always been really, really important to me growing up. And I want to say something of like what really drives me to Bernie Sanders, and that is that climate change is real. It's absolutely real, and it's important that we deal with it. Now, about a year ago, 2 years ago now, my father and I, we co-founded a business where we are trying to make low-energy oxygen generators to get rid of a lot of carbon emissions that happen from shipping oxygen around the world. And this is something that I care deeply about. So our air, I'm going to be really quick about it. It's about 78% nitrogen. It's about 21% oxygen, 1% argon. And then there's trace amounts of other things like CO2. There's CH4, which is called methane. There's H2O, water vapor. And these trace amounts of gases that are in there, when light comes down from the sun, infrared radiation makes these things vibrate. these little molecules. And nitrogen and oxygen, it doesn't really happen with that, but it happens with these compounds. And when they vibrate, they move around a lot, and they start to heat things up. And you know, when we found out that this was the case, was actually in 1896. Okay? I think a lot of people think that climate change is like some kind of new revelation, but the first person to get the Nobel Prize in chemistry figured this out, that CO2 was a greenhouse gas. We've known for it's been 124 years since we've known this, and our politicians have not stepped up to the plate. If you think about it, a long time ago, millions of years ago, when dinosaurs walked the earth, right? There were the world was a lot hotter back then, right? In fact, Utah was underwater. There was this big lake called Lake Bonneville back then, and that's why we have such interesting rock formations down in Moab and everything like that. But back then, you know, the animals, they had adapted to this very hot climate, and then they died, and they went into the ground, and all the carbon that was part of them went into the ground with them and stayed there for millions of years. And then we figured out that their remains, the oil, could be used to make energy, and we started to burn it. And we released that carbon back up into the atmosphere. And it is starting to change our climate very rapidly to how it was back in the dinosaur ages. And you know what? We are not acclimated to that kind of climate. We're not ready for it. And so when we talk about climate change, the big thing that we have to worry about, it's not necessarily the heat. It's the rapid change that's going to happen. It's going to happen within decades instead of over millions of years. It's going to happen all at once, right? And so these are the things that I think about all the time. I'll tell you, I think about climate change every single day. Well, obviously, there's the very visceral events like the natural disasters that happen, the hurricanes, the flash floods, the raging wildfires. But there's also going to be some areas are going to have flooding and some areas are going to have drought. And now we've got to figure out how we're going to move our farming around to the different climates, because all of a sudden it's going to change on us underneath. And one of the biggest things I worry about is social unrest. The people that are going to be most hit by climate change are in some of the poorest areas in the world. And we've already seen that when people migrate from poor areas to the more rich areas, the rich areas don't like it so much. And this is why the Department of Defense is so worried about this and considers climate change to be one of the biggest issues coming up. Well, I'm a member of the church, and this is something that I've cared about my whole life. There's a couple of things I'd like to share with you. One is this, there's the scripture that says, the earth rolls upon her wings, and the sun giveth his light by day, and the moon giveth her light by night. And the stars also give their light as they roll upon their wings in their glory in the midst of the power of God. Behold, all these are kingdoms, and any man who hath seen any of the least of these hath seen God moving in his majesty and power. In another scripture it says, yea, all things which come of the earth, in the season thereof are made for the benefit and the use of man, both to please the eye and to gladden the heart. Yea, for food and for raiment, for taste and for smell, to strengthen the body and to enliven the soul. And it pleaseth God that he hath given all these things unto man, for unto this end were they made to be used, with judgment not to excess, neither by extortion. And in nothing doth man offend God, or against none of his wrath kindled, save those who confess not his hand in all things, and obey not his commandments. He wants us to take care of this planet that has been given to us. The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, gave us 10 years, to 2030, to cut global emissions in half. And that is a daunting task. It really is. And it requires a World War III kind of effort amongst all of us to make sure that that happens. And I can tell you with a certainty, I've gone through all the candidates, and there is only one candidate who is serious about that, and it's Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, he's going to put $16.3 trillion. He understands the crisis that we are in, and he is willing to devote the resources so that we can save our planet for ourselves and for our children and for their children. It sounds like a lot, but it actually saves money over a long time. If we don't do anything, it is going to cost us a whole lot more. So we can invest now and save the money later, or we can be in dire straits later. He wants to put a smart grid in. He wants to update all of our electricity so that it's more energy efficient. He wants to put $2.18 trillion to update our homes and businesses to make them more energy efficient. He wants to put $2.09 trillion to subsidize electric vehicles. Salt Lake City has the 7th worst air quality in the entire nation. We're like fighting neck and neck with Los Angeles that has 10 times the population that we do. If we absolutely put electric vehicles throughout our grid, we could clean up our air overnight, and Bernie Sanders wants to do that. He wants to invest in research and development, and most importantly, he believes that it is a climate justice problem. It's not just about protecting the environment, it's about protecting the working people who are going to be most affected by it. And that's what inspires me some of the most. I'd like to finish up with something that Carl Sagan wrote. He was a famous scientist he made a bunch of television shows, and he was into everything with the cosmos. And we had this telescope, Voyager 1, that went out and it took pictures in the deep reaches of the galaxy. When it went far, far away to where it was hard to communicate with it again, we did one last thing before it left. We turned it around and we faced it back at Earth. And at that point, it was this blue speck. It was like one pixel in the entire picture. And then we looked back at Earth. And he said this about it. He said, look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every being who ever was lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner, how frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit, yes. Settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment the earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we have ever known. This is something I believe in, right? And when I think about our place in the universe, how vast it is, and how cold and dark and empty it is, I think we are here. We have this planet, and we're alive here, and it has history, and people move forward here, and there is one candidate who is going to save it for the next generation, and that is Bernie Sanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for those remarks. Our concluding speaker today will be Lou, who is coming up to the stage right now. Give them a round of applause, please.
I know y'all really ready for that ice cream, so far, how's it been? Oh, to be in the video, I have to be here.
Or further over.
Or further over. Let's do this. because I don't do podiums very well either because I'm short. What did you think about Jane speaking today? That doesn't seem like it's really that, what's the word, believable. So what's that energy you had for Jane today? There we go, that's a little bit better. Now one of the things that I am speaking actually on behalf of the North Utah chapter of Black Lives Matter, as well as Civil Riot, and a few other organizations around the way that, well, not necessarily on behalf of Civil Riot, I'm part of Civil Riot, and climate change is something that's very, very important to us. And as a member of the church, one of the things that growing up in Texas, I'm from Dallas, Texas originally, and there is a huge population of very patriotic people that are out there. However, there's a big split in my family. I'm very multiracial. My mother is Mexican, but from a MENA background, which is Middle Eastern North African. My father is Irish and Jewish, which is another story unto itself, but my grandmother was very, very politically involved and very Republican, except when it came to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Because of the policies that FDR had enacted, people like my grandfather, who came back from World War II, having served in the Pacific arena, was able to have guaranteed a job when he came back. And not just a job that was paying a little bit so that he could afford one thing and then he had to go and get a second job to be able to afford his mortgage, but that job paid for everything. His food, his mortgage, the cars that he bought, the vacations that he took, and the pension that he was able to have as an engineer with what company was called at the time. It was Ling Timco. My grandmother happened to work for, actually, it's the other way around. My grandmother worked for Ling Timco. She was a riveter during World War II. My grandfather worked for Vought. Eventually, the two conglomerations came together and it became LTV or Ling Timco Vought. Eventually, Ling and Timco got kicked out of the way and it was just Vought. So when it comes to like defense contracting, patriotic jobs, my family has been arms deep in what it means to be patriotic, not only just serving our country and actually putting your life on the line, but actually being the one staying at home and riveting those airplanes that are going over to keep our nation safe. But unfortunately, we have a lot of things going on right now in the Middle East. We have a lot of wars that they're not really for the defense of domestic good, they're for corporate interests. And a lot of our veterans are coming home with nothing, with bodies that are broken, that are bruised, that are mangled, with brains that will never be able to function as they once did because they are so mired by the tumult of PTSD. One of those being a cousin of mine, one of them being the man I was going to marry, who died in Afghanistan because of an IED. A senseless war based on corporate greed and not on domestic defense. And I know the one thing that Bernie has had is a consistent record of actually fighting for the rights of the people, wanting to end the endless wars up even to the beginning of the Vietnam War, knowing that this had nothing to do about our patriotic interests, but everything to do with starting wars on behalf of corporate interests. The wars that we see, when we talk about socialism in South America, we have to understand that those socialistic practices came at the result of corporate interests, wanting to take away democratically elected governments and putting in dictatorships for bananas, for mangoes, for pineapples. And this had nothing to do with keeping ourselves prosperous as a nation. This had everything to do with Dole, Chiquita, and all of these corporate interests. When you talk to the Republicans on the other side, folks who are hardworking Americans, the Rust Belt Americans, the one thing that they will tell you that they despise about their party is the corporate greed. We don't have to talk about socialism whatsoever. We can talk about the promise of FDR. We can talk about the stewardship that we have as members of the church. One of the things that, as a member of the church, I loved President Hinckley. And unfortunately, as a first-generation immigrant, as a daughter of Mexicans who came here, we know that part of our legacy is pioneers. People doing the most difficult tasks in order to ensure prosperity for their people, prosperity for their children, coming from England, from Scandinavia, for the promise of something better than what they had. And when we talk to our brothers and sisters who also share the faith, we need to remind them that we too, as Pioneer Legacy, were once immigrants. We once had to toil across a great land with no money, with uncertainty, with unsurety of, and knowing that we had to bury our children along the way. When we talk about these really difficult subjects, it is not hard to bring it back to understandings and to context and to rhetoric that we would understand. Ask them, what would their ancestors have done if they were told they could not come to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ? What if their relatives were told, no, we've got to keep these lands safe. You cannot hear the restored message of the Savior. There's so many ways that we can reach across the aisles to people who are struggling, to make them understand that all we want to do is to reclaim the promise of FDR, that great New Deal that was in what was manifested was the reason that my grandparents were able to retire with a pension and live comfortably. It's the reason why they had good, generous bonuses, because corporate entities were being taxed at 90%. They were incentivized to invest in this country. They were incentivized to make America great. Now, for some people, America was never great. For the indigenous, for the migrant workers, for the black American, this country was only mediocre. But it was still a lot better than what it was before, because of people like Bernie Sanders, who fought for civil rights, who literally put his body on the line, who was arrested alongside Martin Luther King Jr. for the right of people like myself, who would not be able to even use this bathroom or that water fountain upstairs if it were not for brave warriors like him willing to make those sacrifices. So I know that these difficult conversations will happen. I'm going to close with a few scriptures. Because I am, even though I'm radical, I do love the Savior, and the Savior is a radical. The Savior is not a Republican, regardless of whatever higher authority is going to tell you. When he spoke to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he condemned them. When he spoke to the ruling class, he said, "You will not make it into heaven." And yes, they were really offended, but he didn't care about them being offended. He cared about the truth, and he cared about compassion. This is DNC 823. For who of him, or for of him, unto whom much is given, much is required. And he who sins against the greater light shall receive condemnation. Thou shalt be diligent in preserving this is DNC 136:27, and I'm sure I'm making it super hard for the interpreter there because I speak so fast. Thou shalt be diligent in preserving what thou hast, that thou may be wise steward, for it is a free gift of the Lord thy God, and thou art his steward. So this planet that we've been given, it wasn't given for developers, it wasn't given for real estate companies in Salt Lake to make the inland port. It was made so that we can continue to have a prosperous land. It was created so that we could be good stewards of it, so that there was something left for the generations to come. The official Mormon position or LDS position because it's now long-term, is to encourage its members to stay in their homelands or to immigrate legally. I know I'm switching around, but we've only got a lot of time, and I want to make sure we get all this. But once they are here, however, they are to be treated with love, dignity, and respect. And the laws should not separate families. And this was President Gordon B. Hinckley. He also said, use it up, wear it out, make do or do without. Now, some Republicans would tell you that's socialism. That's the exact same propaganda that got us through World Wars I and II. The same generation that we often look back to as the greatest generation. Those were not socialistic principles. These were American values. And if we did not have this type of propaganda, we would have lost the war. My great-grandmother survived Auschwitz and Dachau. And if it weren't for being able, when we were not conserving here, when we were not rationing, when we weren't using these so-called socialistic values to lessen what we had, to make do with what we had, to sew, to fix, to not over-consume, these were considered American values. However, when we had Reagan in the office, somehow a good actor was able to distort what America was meant to be. We had Wall Street that came out as a movie, and we saw greed and corporate interest and the Wall Street elite change our mentality of what it was to be American. We stomped on the little person, and we thought that that was good. We heard Michael Douglas say, greed is good. But my fellow brothers and sisters, if we follow the Savior, we know this is an anathema to his gospel. We know this because the times are changing, and even with our own faith, we're no longer calling it home teaching, we're talking ministry. We're trying to center ourselves back to a Christ-focused ministry. And we can't do that with the current administration in office. And so when you talk to your family members, ask them, what did they think of FDR? What did they think about Victory Gardens? Because our greatest generation were the original hipsters. They were resewing their clothing. They were going to secondhand shops. They were making homesteads before that. I want to remind you that we all make covenants as members of the church to stand with those that stand in need of comfort. And right now, brothers and sisters, our country is in dire need of comfort. And the only candidate that could bring us that comfort is Bernie Sanders. So if you believe this as I believe this, I challenge you, have a home evening where you ask about what it was like, especially your older relatives who lived through the time of the Great Depression, who had to ration, and who understand that provident living is a tenet of our faith, who have pioneer ancestors. Have a dinner with them. Make some of those funeral potatoes. Make some of those Hawaiian haystacks. And invite them to break bread. And don't talk about socialism. Don't talk about the things that are controversial. But ask them what it was like to live in a country where being American, united by the understanding that as a unified country and a unified nation, that was how we were going to fight the enemy. Remind them that their ancestors, too, were once immigrants, fearful of what they were going to come and see and what they were going to have to experience. Remind them that they too were poor and hungry and searched for something greater. And when they were allowed to come into this country and cross the plains, they found the promise that America has to be able to be that promised land. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, so thank you everybody for your Herculean endurance. Now is the time for the long-awaited ice cream. So please head to the back of the room, grab some ice cream, feel free to mingle. In about 5 minutes, we're going to watch one more video and then we'll do our Q&A panel with all of our speakers and a couple of others. So while you're getting the ice cream in your system, think of things you may want to ask or get clarified, and ice cream is in the back of the room. Before anyone stands up, can I get 2 or 3 volunteers to help pass out and replenish the ice cream as it's being passed out? Can 2 or 3 people raise their hands? 1, 2, all right, 3. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Get some ice cream. We'll be continuing in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Thank you.
even though I'm autistic, that is oddly a characteristic I have. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
You're going to go after the panel.
I wasn't even scheduled to speak, so I'm got blessed with the gift of gab.
That was amazing.
Thank you. Just loved it. Thank you.
And you weren't scheduled?
Not at all. No. I was I was like, oh shit, what am I gonna say? What am I gonna say?
Yeah, well, you nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's what, when President Trump was first campaigning, the notion of making it great again and this talk about how people bristle to the idea of socialism, I'm like, we had nothing after the war, and if it weren't for public programs, and maybe I think that's where we need to shift and reframe it as public programs.
Saying socialism, and it's been
Well, and the thing is, even liberal media is saying that as well.
Yes.
With Chris Matthews.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. He's that, yeah.
I mean, it basically, the decline of the Democratic Party started when I don't remember if it was 9th or 10th Circuit Court upheld the ruling that the backroom deals that were going on were perfectly okay when it was against the charters. And so that was sort of a symbol where we do need the revolution.
And a peaceful. I never realized Bill Clinton was retiring like this. I just wasn't here.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I had to raise I had to take care of my grandparents at the end of their life. I became very familiar with their backstories and how when my grandmother first met my grandfather, she was living in a boarding house, working at the for Lincoln Co. South Texas. And when they met, they were competing companies. There was a cafeteria thing, sandwich. And they met and they forgot to But like all of these things that my grandfather had, he was very well taken care of by some people. And LTD is what eventually became, now it's bought. My great grandmother. That was on my father's side. And so, she survived Auschwitz and Dachau. She was actually liberated from Auschwitz. She had begun in Dachau because she was rather attractive. And so they went to Hawaii, and so there she was actually trafficked for the officers. And she fled to Ireland, and that's where she met my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandmother. And she renounced Judaism. I renounced all faith, but didn't have Catholicism. She's still in the ritual. And it's what her husband wanted, in fact, in those days, she was so she converted. Just pretty much and then my mother's from Mexico.
So in the interest of time and people's energy levels, I know it's been a really long event so far. What we're going to do is in about a minute, I'm going to put on our closer video. And then we're going to, if people want to stay after for a very short Q&A, we can. Otherwise, I think after the closer video, we'll just wrap up early. And I want to thank everybody for showing up today and taking the time to hear from all our speakers and being such a great audience. So here, get your ice cream, get back in your seats. Here in about a minute, I'm going to turn on our closer video for everybody.
Can I borrow that for a minute? I know you don't know who I am. Thank you. That's right. Give me 60 seconds. You're something official. I'm something official.
All right, we're going to have one impromptu speaker while people are wrapping up with the ice cream.
Impromptu. Hey, these guys don't know who I am. You all don't know who I am. But I was sent here to give you a message. As Latter-day Saints, as Latter-day Saints, our doctrine teaches us that governments were instituted for the good of man. In doing that, our Heavenly Father inspired an intriguing document. This document.
Wait, what document?
Constitution of the United States. Something that everybody is scared to death of. Right? Well, when you look at the Constitution of the United States, it begins with a preamble. The preamble says that in order to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense, and to promote the general welfare, that we establish the Constitution. Now, conservatives have a tendency to stop reading right there, and then they will make the argument that promoting the general welfare doesn't mean spending any money on it. It doesn't mean providing for the general welfare. But we keep reading, and we go down to Article 1, Section 8. And in Article 1, Section 8, it tells us that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, to pay for the debts, and to provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. Brothers and sisters, that's what Bernie's trying to do. He's trying to provide for the general welfare. We provide for the common defense so well, we have a huge military-industrial complex. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a general welfare complex? That's what Bernie's trying to do. In 1948, after World War II, the United Nations was being formed, and the United States representatives wrote an interesting document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And they told Germany, they told Italy, and they told Japan, you're going to integrate this document, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, into your constitutions. But isn't it intriguing that when we came back and we introduced that same document to our Senate, they refused to ratify? The fact is in the United States, you do not hold any human rights. We have a few civil rights, but you do not have the right to food and water, not under the Constitution, not under our law. You don't have the right to shelter.
60 seconds. We're running low on time.
So, brothers and sisters, I hold a Juris Doctorate degree. I hold a postdoctorate master's degree in health law and policy. My name is Kim Christensen. I'm a social democrat. Tuesday, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. In November, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders. And I look forward to seeing Dr. J on that stand on January 20th, 2021, as Bernie Sanders is sworn in as President of the United States. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to transition to the closing video, and I'm going to turn off the lights so we get full theatrical effect. Let's give that a try.
No?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you, though. All right. I want everyone to think about the sum total of their experience today. When Killer Mike says, carry in that booth the memory of this room, think of this room today. And I'm going to let Killer Mike take it. Oops, wrong button. I forgot to unmute it. My bad. Let's start it over. And
I just want to say one of my favorite writers growing up was a man named James Baldwin. And I remember Baldwin saying You ask my father to wait, my brother to wait, my uncle to wait. How long must I wait on freedom? How long must I wait on rights and equality and liberty? And as a black child, that resonated with me because I knew I'd been denied and I personalized that. But as I grew, I started to understand poor white people have been denied. Women have been denied. Gays and lesbians, transgender people been denied. Immigrant children been denied. Everybody outside of that 1% has been denied. So I want you to take a few seconds to look to your left and look to your right. Look to your neighbor and say, neighbor, the time is now. There are more of us. We're stronger. We will wait no longer. The time is now. When you go to that booth next year, I need you to carry in that booth the memory of this room. Black, white, straight, gay, men, female. We are together. We are united. Our time is right now. We will not wait 4 more years. We will not wait 20 more years. We will not wait 2 more presidents. We will not wait 3 more presidents. The time is now. The time is not in the future. The time is not some abstract time. The time is not something that might be. The time ain't something that could be. The time ain't nothing that should be, that would be. It ain't tomorrow. It ain't the day after. It ain't coming next week. The time is now. Senator Bernard Sanders will be the next president of the United States of America.
Yeah, so we're just, the camera is focused on the floor. Stage.
Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. I just want to give a round of applause for the amazing organizers who did this. Jennifer, Grace,
Keep going,
me
keep
kind
going.
of. What? Where
Keep
am I
going to the
going? I'm
middle.
so confused.
Okay, now you're on camera.
Okay, hey everybody. I know that we've been here for a long time. I think all of us are feeling really inspired right now. I had to run out for a quick moment, but from what the moments I was here, I just feel so energized by this room. I'm wondering if y'all feel the same.
Yes.
And the election is in 2 days. We have Sunday and Monday, and kind of today. And then we have a few days, 3 days, let's say 3 days. And there's a lot that we can do in the next 3 days, and that's what I want to quickly talk about. Because right now we're in a room of people, I think, who are of the same mind, right? We all love Bernie, we all know what this movement is about, but now we actually need to go talk to people who may not agree with us, people who don't know the truth about Bernie, people who only hear what the corporate media says about Bernie. I don't know if y'all saw on MSNBC today, they said, will we be able to stop Bernie and the coronavirus? Comparing him to the coronavirus. So, the corporate media is not being honest with people, and that's why it's incumbent on us to talk to our neighbors and to talk to our friends. So, first, by show of hands, who in this room has already voted? Cool. For those of you who haven't voted and want voter information, I'm going to tell you to text the word Utah vote to a number. So if anybody needs voter information or access to the Bernie Sanders Utah hotline. And this hotline is to register any complaints, any funny business, what have you. I know some stuff went down in 2016. We're on top of it this time around, and we don't want anything bad to happen. So if you text the number 67760 and you text Utah vote, which is one word, you'll get all the voter information that you will need for the upcoming primary here in Utah. We have these little quarter pagers in the front. And then the most important thing that we can do between now and Tuesday is talking to people we do know and talking to people we don't know. So I'm going to start with talking to people we don't know. That's canvassing, door-to-door knocking. And we have loads of opportunities between now and Tuesday. Basically, if you find a 2-hour block between now and Tuesday that you can canvas, we need you. We need you because your neighbors will not know the truth about this movement. They won't be able to be brought into this movement if you're not going to their door and talking to them. We quite literally need to meet people where they're at, both physically and ideologically. So if everybody can actually pull out their phone for a second, and in your text messages, type in 67760. And I'll wait for everybody to get there. 67760. And to this number, I want everybody to text, it's one word, Utah knock. Utah knock. And when you text that number, and you text Utah knock again to 67760, you will get an automatic reply with a link to sign up to Canvas out of our West Valley City office anytime, any day, between now and Tuesday night, when voting ends at 8 p.m. So really, if you can find any time, this is how we make the difference. There's so much on the line, and with the way the race is going, every delegate counts. Every knock matters, every vote matters, and we need to win every delegate in Utah. We need to, and I think we're going to. We need to be the only viable candidate here. And I think we're well on track to doing that, but we still have work to do. And there still is work we can do to win more delegates for Bernie here. So you can pick these up on your way out. Again, Utah knock 67760. So that's what you can do between now and Super Tuesday at 8 p.m. You can knock up until 7:45. Give people time to get to the polls. We're going to be knocking. I'm going to be knocking right until the mark because we want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and more importantly, that the people's voice is heard. And we know who the people's voice is with. It's with Bernie, right? Yes. Awesome. Awesome. So that's talking to people we do know. Is there a quick question?
Yeah, sorry. So we weren't sure if you could do stuff on Tuesday.
Yes.
And still trying to get people out, going outdoors.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to be knocking up until the minute.
If you could legit rent 16 passenger van and have the capacity to do so, you could literally go to like the west side where people may not have that opportunity, but may not have the money for mass transit, may not be in the free fare zone, or even go to the shelters where people might be registered, because no one is looking at our unsheltered residents as viable potential voters and do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely want to uplift what we just brought because that's huge. There are a lot of restrictions and barriers that people have to vote, and if we have access to help people overcome those barriers, we should be doing it. So that's talking to people we don't know. Hugely important. Also hugely important and much more difficult, talking to people we do know. Who here has friends who probably won't vote? I know I do. I know I have friends who probably won't vote. Who has friends who would they probably vote for Bernie if you spoke to them?
Yes.
Right? That can make all the difference. And I think everybody in this room can probably say we've spoken to our friends about politics at some point or another. But between now and Super Tuesday, we need to have intentional and targeted conversations with the people in our lives so we can talk to them about Bernie Sanders and get them out to vote for him. So I don't know if anybody here has the Burn app downloaded. Does anybody, by show of hands, who has that downloaded? For people who don't, if you wouldn't mind pulling out your phone and downloading the Burn app, it's a really quick download. This is a really easy way to reach out to your friends and to get them the message of Bernie and to get them the information that they need. Basically, the point of this is that we're not just talking to our friends about politics in any usual way. We're like going into the conversation with an intention to get them to act. It's an organizing conversation more so than a debate conversation or a discourse conversation, what have you. So I'm going to give everybody a second to download the Burn app. I want to quickly do a 3-minute tutorial. I know you've been here long. We have extra ice cream in the back that you can get when this is over. But yeah, for people who don't have the Burn app downloaded, please go ahead and download that.
Rose, isn't it true that if you are a registered Republican, you can still vote in the Democratic primary.
Yes.
I think that's something that's really important for us. I think there are some people that think, well, I can't do that because I'm a registered Republican. I think we need to really let people know that they may not want to vote for him in the general election, but they may want to vote for him in the primary.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important for us to share with our friends too.
Yeah, that's hugely important. The Democratic primary here is an open primary. Anybody can go. Independents, unaffiliated, Green Party, Republican, Democrat, anybody. Utah switched from a super inaccessible system of the caucus to a pretty accessible system with the early voting, the ballot voting, what have you. So for folks who have the Burn app downloaded, I just want to quickly show how you can log friends on this. First of all, you can import your contacts. That's what I did with all of my friends in Vegas, where I'm from. And you can just send them text by just clicking on their names and it sends it out. When you add people on the Burn app, they don't get a notification, they don't know that you added them, and we won't reach out to them on behalf of you, ever. The point of the Burn app is that you are the point of contact for this person with the campaign. This person is not going to be reached if you don't reach them. So on the bottom of the Burn app, if you go to the Friends tab, and then you click, I'm pretty sure I have this right, you click Add a Friend. Let's just tutorial with Jane Sanders. We always tutorial with Jane Sanders. We met her today. She is a friend. So you just need their first name, last name, city, and state. If you don't have their zip code, that's A-okay. So just go ahead and put in Jane Sanders and then Burlington, Vermont. And then once you do that, it will bring up her voter record. And what the Burn app does, it's linked to public voter records. So when you do that, Jane's profile should pop up. Are people who are following along seeing that? So you click on her profile, and then there are a series of questions that you need to answer. Let's say you don't know if your friend supports Bernie or not. What you can simply do, let's pretend Jane is our friend. We don't know who she supports. You simply click Save on the bottom. That saves this person into your friends list, and then you can go back to them at any time. You can contact them in the way you always contact them, be it in person, text message, Facebook, phone, what have you. But if you know that they support Bernie, what you'll go ahead and do is log that information, and you'll mark them as a Bernie 1, meaning that they strongly support Bernie, or a Bernie 2, and so on. And then after that, when you have all of your friends added, you just go back to My Friends, click on that friend, and then it sends you an automated text option that has all of the information that they're gonna need to vote. So it's a super great, super easy system, and it can make all the difference. You can do this during commercial breaks, while you're stuck in traffic, what have you. It's a really, really amazing way that we can reach out to the people in our lives. And if you're not tech savvy and the Burn app isn't for you, I still want to encourage everybody in this room to reach out to 10 people you know who might not be voting, or who may not be voting for Bernie. This can be your friends, your families, your coworkers, your neighbors, and just have a simple conversation with them. And it's not a debate. We just want to find out what matters to them and give them space to be heard. Because at the end of the day, people just want to be heard, and our system is set up so that they're not heard. So when you give them that space and you listen to them and hear what matters to them, all you really have to do at that point is just affirm the importance of what they're saying and let them know the work is cut out for us. Once you know what they care about, Bernie's the best on every issue in this race. He's the best on every single issue. If they care about the environment, healthcare, education, anything, you just have to let them know about Bernie's record. And in my experience, it's been as easy as that. So I really want to encourage everybody to use the Burn app to organize your friends and communities. Every conversation that you have with somebody you do and don't know between now and Tuesday at 8 p.m. can make all the difference. It can make the difference of a delegate for Bernie, 2 delegates for Bernie. We have 29 delegates here. That can flip the convention and make it so that it's not contested and nobody can steal it from us. Nobody can steal it from the people. Nobody can use their super delegates to override our voice. So I'll take any questions. Otherwise, everybody please take one of these on your way out. Again, this has the Utah knock and Utah vote information. and the number that you text that to. You can share this with your friends and family. And there's also a Burn app one-pager that has all the information that you need to use the Burn app. Are there any questions?
No, but could you put both of those on the event page?
Yes.
So that way they can look at it that way?
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. The event page meaning the Mobilize one or the Facebook one?
Both?
Okay.
All of them.
I don't have access to the Facebook, Salem
I do.
does, but I'll make sure it gets there. Cool. Well, I just want to give another round of applause for the folks who organized this. We really are building, especially Phelan. Big round of applause for Phelan. Yeah, and I'll let Phelan take it away.
Okay, so 2 things, and then we're actually done, I promise. One, I just want to quickly go over how to vote for Bernie, or whatever your choice is. Hopefully that's Bernie, especially for those who are going to be watching the video and who weren't here today. So just to restate, Democratic Party has an open primary, so all voters in the state of Utah, regardless of party affiliation, may vote in the primary. If you want to vote and you're not affiliated with either party, basically you can go to an early polling location or your same-day voting day polling location and request a Democratic ballot from the worker at the poll. Furthermore, if you go to vote.utah.gov, you can find your polling station, you can check your voter registration, and do all the things you need to do to be able to vote. And then, let's see, I want to, before we turn off the video, thank everyone who came. Again, give yourselves a round of applause for showing up. And I want to give a thanks to our speakers, not just me, but everybody who was able to show up today. I'm going to go kill the video, but can we have, as everyone leaves, I would appreciate some help getting all the chairs back up and that kind of thing. If anyone's willing to help clean up, that would be super helpful. Thank you again, everybody, for coming. And real quick, before we end, Grace is going to give our closing prayer.
Our dear kind and loving Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this wonderful opportunity that we have to gather here and listen to the wonderful and inspiring speakers. We're thankful for the many blessings that help us given us and for this great man. And we ask you to please bless each one of us that we will have the strength to talk to our friends and neighbors about Senator Bernie Sanders for his great policies that includes everyone in this country. We ask you to just bless all the people that they will make a good choice and vote for him for this coming Tuesday. We pray for the continuous guidance and we ask you to please keep us safe as we go home in this situation.
Phelan, is there going to be like a copy of this feed?